Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 89. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier on in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I just had coffee, and I'm completely juiced for part 2 of this interview. So here we go. We're both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Awesome, Nick. Hey, as you mentioned, we are in part 2 of our two-parter with Yadin Porter de León. And if you haven't listened to episode 88, which is part 1, I highly encourage you to do that. He took us on a trip, gave us his background, gave us a lot of context about the, where he came from and why, he has some of the opinions that he has. And then he kind of called us all out, right? About if you want to make a change in your career, like what you need to do and the philosophical basis of doing it and urging us to actually do it, right? So if you need that fire lit, go listen to episode 88. It was a really great episode.
Yeah, it definitely was. And the greatness continues here. Sometimes we have a certain trajectory that we want the guest to get on when we think about the episode. This one actually went on a different trajectory that was probably even better than what we imagined. If you need to change your career trajectory, Yadin outlines a couple of things that you can do that are practical. It's hard work, but if you're committed to do it, you can make a change. And you're going to have to start with the man in the mirror, or woman in the mirror. So, let's hear part 2 of Yadin Porter de León's interview.
Totally. Don't get me started on the whole consciousness, unconsciousness, because I'll get super deep and spiritual on you, even though this is an IT podcast.
There you go.
Well, it's a career podcast, so
it is.
And we'll have you back to talk about that. But now, so hopefully we've lit a fire under people who maybe haven't thought about a change or needed that fire lit to make a change. And then you've talked about how you got started, right? Listening, reading, and then we've talked about the next step, which is participating. So maybe, at this point you can talk a little bit about some of those lessons that you learned along the way that actually, helped you progress. Maybe thinking about that next higher level up, how to talk to a manager, how to talk to a director, how to talk to a C-level executive, maybe think about how they're thinking that got you along this path to where you are now.
Yeah. Okay. There's lots of tips and tricks, and everyone loves to have that blog post, 5 things to do to boost your career in order to take it to the next level. That's like a title you'll see a billion times.
You have to have a number in your title.
Yeah, 5 things or 10 things. And then it's so funny because you'll get into this weird sort of mired, you get deep into the marketing world.
Is that an MBO for you? Just tell me the truth.
No, it's not. My MBO, actually, no, it's so funny because my MBO is engagement. So I don't actually have any OKRs or MBOs that are really tied to any particular numbers. I engage with people. Basically, my job is, which is fairly unique, which is why I kind of I have this weird background of film school and MBA in information technologies and coding, but sales and all this other stuff. So because I liked all these things, then I was betting on the fact that, okay, well, there's going to be a role that, fits all this stuff. And lo and behold, it showed itself. But the tips and tricks, that are out there, and it's funny, like I was saying, there's a whole blog post on how to write good titles for blog posts. Hey, if you find a blog post that performs really well on Google and it says 10 tricks for yada yada, just write a blog post called 11 tricks for yada yada, and it'll do even better. I kid you not. This is how the marketing world, and this is why I keep showing up every day to marketing saying, nope, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to do stuff that makes sense, that helps people. Crazy idea. So when it comes to like career progression, there's not a lot of tips and tricks that are really going to help you move the needle. Like you'll go to a conference, you'll listen to a podcast, and you'll be writing fiercely notes. Oh wow, okay, I got to do this on my resume, or I have to adjust this on my LinkedIn page. Or when I talk to people, I have to like make eye contact. Or there's all that stuff is good. There's lots of goodness in those, but that's a rigor. That's a skill set, and those are like discrete skills. But if you really want to take sort of a transformational approach to like I want to change actually the trajectory of my career, you have to actually take a step back and start to say, look, am I happy with this direction that I'm going? Do I want to do something different? If I don't, if I want to make incremental changes, like I want to make a shift to another company and I want to feel comfortable. And one's really important too, and people talk about that a lot, like, oh, you have to step forward, you have to raise your hand, you have to do different projects. Some people, and a lot of people, want to just be like a database admin, and they're really good at it. They're great at it, and people love them for it, and they want to keep doing it. But they want to have more time for their family. So then if that's what you want, decide that's what you want, and then do it. Go find a company where you're a DBA, and you're so good at it that you can show up, not have to kill yourself on the job, and have time to go to your kid's soccer game, be there for your spouse, get exercise when you need it, eat right. Do that, and don't feel like just because you're listening to a career podcast, like you have to be like the president or CEO of AWS someday. That's not what you have to do. You have to actually decide, what am I actually going to? How am I going to have a life? Do I want to have a cardiac arrest at age 49? And not make it to 50? Is that what I want? Because there's someone else who can do that same job and not have a heart attack because they're intrinsically happy doing that work. You don't have to be a manager. If you don't like managing people, don't manage people. Just because you think it's that next step, it's not for everybody. So many people hate their jobs because their manager took a management job when they didn't know anything or want to be a manager. I kid you not. That's how so many people don't like their job, because I am my manager. They don't know anything about people. Nobody ever trained them to be a manager. They only took the job because they thought it was the next step in their career, when they didn't actually make the conscious choice of actually saying, this is what I actually want to do next. And sometimes you can follow other people and say, hey, well, they did this and that and that, so therefore I'm going to do this and that and that. But buyer beware, if you swallow something whole. That's why I take a philosophical approach and say, hey, this is what I did in my career. I did that. I was a filmmaker, and then I switched over to regional manager, and then I've never had the same job title twice, which is not what everyone wants to do, and that's not what everyone should do. It's not for everybody. But what I do advocate for people is do make a declarative choice of the type of life and work that you want to, because everything is life balance. There's no work life. Everything is life. Your job is life. Your kids are life. Your spouse is life. Your exercise, it's all life balance. So don't separate those two. It's not a seesaw. I read a whole blog post about this, about life work balance is a total myth. Everything feeds your soul, takes energy from you, whether that's your kids or or fixing the sink. All of that stuff is the same give and take. So decide what you want that balance to be. And of course, everyone wants to say, oh, I only want to work 2 hours a week, and I want the rest of the time to basically do whatever I want. Yes, okay, everyone wants to be, well, not everyone, but a lot of people want to be retired, okay? So you have to balance that with a little bit of reality. All right, I need to pay my mortgage. I need to be able to buy food. I want to go on vacation. All right, those are I want. But then I don't want a boss that screams at me, that demoralizes me. Okay, it's kind of a low bar. I'd set the bar a little bit higher, but you have to be really declarative about that. And so when you talk about, I want to dispel a lot of myths. When you say, hey, Yadin, like, tell me about, your career progression. How do you level up? I want to be really, really clear is that every time that I approached every new job, it was because I looked at it saying, is this a new path, that I feel like I'm going to grow with, and I feel like it's going to take me in the direction that I want to go, or is it just going to be something that I really love to do right now? Because I don't know what's next. Like right now, I'm in this role. I have this weird title. My title is global. I mean, if I can even remember what my title is, just global executive content strategist. Does that mean anything to anybody? It's. But then when I talk to the person who's hiring, I'm like, this is super cool. I'm going to talk to technology leaders. I'm going to talk about I'm going to create content with them. I'm going to help them. Like I literally have like CIOs that hit me up on LinkedIn and say, hey, look, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? Which is just blow. I'm like, and the first time that happened, I'm like, oh, how do I help a CIO get a job? This is an interesting problem. But if you're afraid of trying something new every time, and it's going to totally freak you out and stress you out, and your kids will never see you, or they're going to see stressed out mom or dad, don't do that. You don't have to be transformative every single day. What you do is you have to feed the lifestyle that you want. So decide what that is. If you like surfing, then focus on surfing and get the job that pays your bills and allows you to surf, and you'll be happier for it. I mean, you still have to retire at some point, I suppose. I don't know, maybe. That's up to you. You can figure that part out. Excel is really good at spreadsheeting. So if you want to, run the numbers, go for it. So that's, my advice really for people is don't chase pay and title. Don't take prescriptive advice from people who say you have to, get an MBA, and then you have to get all these certifications, then you have to do this. Really decide what kind of lifestyle you want first. And, and then think about it all the way through retirement. There's pre-retirement where you might work a little bit and then you might not work at all. And think about that and then decide, and then make peace with it and say, I am not going to be rich, and that's cool. I am not going to live in X house. That's cool. I'm not going to have X car. That's totally fine with me, because you know what? I'm going to have the things in place that I've got. So I know getting a little touchy-feely here, a little bit, but you really have, if you don't do that work, and anyone from Kat Troyer to a lot of other people out there who are really hardcore career coaches that do that nothing but that for a living, they will tell you that first. They'll say the hard work of understanding what to do for your next career is understanding what you want. It sounds easy, it sounds commonsensical, but it's not. It is hard to understand what you want and how you want to live your life and what's going to be best for you and your family. So do that work first, because it is hard. Make those decisions first, because they're hard. Then once you do that, other things will come a lot easier. Anyways, end rant.
I want to interrupt for just a second. I think that a lot of people out there may not realize that they really get to have that kind of say. I know it sounds silly, but
it's real.
They don't realize that they have that choice. The Matrix, the problem is choice, right? So
that's right.
I like that analogy.
Choice. Wait, I can talk like the problem is choice.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. Whoa. Keanu. Yeah. But
they're making a new one, by the way. There's another Matrix coming.
Nice.
With Keanu and Carrie-Anne Moss.
Sweet. Well, one of the issues is we don't take the time to reflect on what is now and what we wish it was, and mapping the path between. And I just feel like before here in the last few years, I didn't actually realize that there were so many different opportunities in the technology space available, and I imagine a lot of others are in the same boat. Just like you said earlier, John, if you don't know what's out there and available, how do you know that you can pursue it? And to Yadin's point, if you haven't done that evaluation of what you want out of a job, career, or life, you can't mesh those two together and find out where the intersection is.
Yeah, you're just bumping around in the dark, just throwing resumes out in LinkedIn, which sometimes, people, because like you said, their frustration is that people feel like they're beggars more than choosers in a lot of circumstances. Recruiters are not evil; they are your friends, and you don't have to pay them anything. So make them your friends. If you want a great recruiter, I have two that I trust more than anyone else in the industry. Reach out to me. Go on @PorterDeal on Twitter. DM me. I will give you their contact information. Recruiters are amazing, and they will walk you through that process as well. But the other piece too, to your question, which is about sort of the career advice and kind of how to get to the next level, you have to. And people talk about networking, and networking is definitely key. The one thing you can do though is to scale that out is really proof of work, and that is the number one now pillar of a lot of the way in which people can come to you and you not have to go to them, or to short circuit a lot of conversations. A lot of interview conversations are like, well, I need to get to know to see if you're proficient. If you have proof of work and it's out there, then you can short circuit that conversation. So I have a saying that I like to use that I made up with Ken Hoy. Ken Hoy and I kind of meshed two of our sayings into one at one VMUG UserCon. We came together with this one saying that says, if only 3 people in the world know how good you are, then those 3 people control your career, your destiny, period, bar none. You need more than those 3 people to know how good you are. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, how do I do that? That's where blogging comes in. That's where podcasting comes in. That's where networking comes in, because you need, and whatever way you want to do it, however is comfortable for you, just choose a channel, but you have to figure out a way how to have more than those 3 people know how good you are. Otherwise, they will literally control your destiny, because no one will be able to say, oh yeah, Bob, oh yeah, Susie, they're really great at that. Oh my God, they're an amazing Oracle, DBA. They can do ninja skills with yada yada, or they can take stuff from on-prem to the cloud and back again, and they're just wonderful, amazing platform architects. But if only 3 of those people know, then those 3 people, they're really busy and they're worrying about their own careers, not yours. They have little teeny tiny bits of bandwidth, and they're going to take that bandwidth and give it to their family and give it to their careers. And they're only going to give it maybe a teeny tiny bit to you, because maybe they're your manager and they feel like they're obligated to. You have to take all of what you know and say and all your talent, and you have to put it out there into the world so that everyone knows. And if you're a coder, it's GitHub projects and it's commits and it's all that stuff. If you're something like, a DBA or a sysadmin, it's blog posting and showing other people how to do stuff. Hey, I solved this really hard problem, and here's how I did it. And let me blog post. Even don't worry about how many Twitter followers you have, or blog post, viewers you have, or subscribers, or podcast subscribers you have. It doesn't matter. What matters is, if you want one company to hire you, all that matters is that one person reads your blog, and you can serve it up to them in the interview process. Literally, when I interviewed for VMware, I wrote a blog post just for the VP that was interviewing me. I wrote it just for her, saying, hey, look, that's a really interesting thing. Let me write a blog post. And I wrote it, sent her the link. And she was blown away and super stoked, because A, I wrote a blog post about our conversation, and B, it was immediate proof of work based on something very specific that was important to her and relevant to the conversation. So, you can do things like that. And if you're afraid of typos, or people looking at your work and saying, it's like, no, that's a horrible way to do it. I would never do that. Like, every time people know that I have a Yeti microphone, I get all sorts of hate mail on Twitter, like, Yeti, you should be have a real microphone. Just go out there and just, you have to get over that fear of exposing what you can do, who you are, and what your talent is. You have to get over that, because the only way that you're going to progress in your career is if more than 1 or 2 or 3 people know how good you are. So that's it. That's number 1. If you take anything away from this conversation, take that. Someone besides those 3 people have to know how good you are, or else you're going to struggle to get out of that box or silo or that department where you hate the dude who clicks his teeth next to you and smells funny because he microwaves his fish for lunch.
He doesn't shower every day.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to get out of that until you start letting more people know. And even like interview processes, or even if you don't get the job interview, now more people know how good you are, and I kid you not, there's been lots of situations with people like, oh yeah, I was in that interview with you and that one time, and they were able to vouch for you because they moved to another company that you were interviewing with. It's a small town. Even if you're in Columbus, Ohio, which wonderful cost of living there, it's awesome. Okay. For a tech company, doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to be in Silicon Valley, especially now. Everyone's remote, and just get yourself out there in any way that makes you comfortable. But start doing something, or else you can't. You have to stop complaining. That's it. That's a stop. Every time on Tech Village podcast, which is my podcast, another shameless plug there. Visit this Tech Village podcast.
Smash that subscribe button.
We end it always, what should you stop and what should you start? And it's funny because I never ask myself that question. I always wonder, like, when to start and stop. Stop, making excuses, and stop complaining, because you're not doing anything. And if you want to complain, then don't complain about the fact that you're complaining. Okay, just say that, hey, I'm a complainer. Just own it. I'm a complainer. I'm a curmudgeon, and this is what I like doing, and I'm not going to change. Okay, then be that. But don't ever complain about the fact that you never got to be something other than that. And then start putting yourself out there. So stop complaining, and start actually putting yourself out there. And it does mean being vulnerable. It does mean other people being able to critique your work. But that's only going to make you better. It really will.
That's really interesting. Let's chase that, because you said 2 things that seemingly conflict, right? Put yourself out there in a way that you're comfortable with, but putting yourself out there makes you vulnerable, which is not comfortable. Yeah. Right.
Well, everyone's like just comfortable with a certain level of vulnerability. Like, when you go outside your door, you immediately trust that the person who's walking down the street next to you is not going to kill you. You're like, okay, I have to at least trust that there's a good chance they're not going to do that. So you have to be able to come out with a reasonable level of comfort, even though there's going to be some sort of criticism potentially. But you have to find out what's that acceptable risk for you. Just like, hey, dude, am I going to go to a baseball game? Am I going to go to the grocery store? What's my acceptable level of risk so I don't catch COVID and die? You have to do the same thing for putting yourself out there. What's my acceptable level of risk? And you'll have to find it. If you're saying no level of risk is acceptable, well, then you have to accept the fact that you don't want to go any further than you are. And then if you can do that, then maybe that actually makes you happy. Maybe that makes you absolutely ecstatic. And now your head is totally full of all that tension you had. And you're like, you know what? I'm actually okay. That's actually fine. And then you can go off and stop spinning your wheels and all these other things and just go to your kid's baseball game and be happy, that you have time to make your family dinner. Be that. But you have to decide. You have to decide. Make a decision, make a choice, and be declarative about it.
So that touches on something that we've said before a couple times on this podcast, which is, probably growth and progression requires a little bit of discomfort, right? If you're 100% comfortable, you're probably not growing, right?
That is correct. If you're in a growth mindset, which, means that you have potential to do something that you're not doing now, means that you're going to be in a situation where you don't know the answer to everything. And everyone always feels like, oh, I have to know the answer to everything. Someone asked me, like, well, what's the IOPS for this particular blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, you have to be able to, if you're growing, you have to be able to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, but I am, able to position myself in a way that, shows you or gives you confidence that you can walk in another room and say, hey, look at, John's got it or Nick's got it. I'm cool. They don't know every answer, but dude, they're on fire and they will find the answer. So yes, if you're growing, you do have to you will find yourself in situations that are not, you're outside your immediate comfort zone, or you just feel like things that make you a little bit nervous or push, your comfort level. You don't have to be totally uncomfortable. Like, I was, one of my favorite stories is that I'm like, VMware is one of my customers and I'm sitting there in a room where they're saying, hey, we just acquired AirWatch and we need you to migrate all of those laptops into our VMware.com domain without blowing up the iMacs or the MacBook Pros that everybody has. Can you guys do that? And in 5 minutes, I had to make sure, even though we didn't have the answer, I had to make sure that they were confident that we could help them find the answer. And and this was the first time I'm meeting them, that for some reason the salesperson, the SE, left the room to go get coffee or something. And they just left me in the room with these incredibly smart people, these really, really smart people who knew, who knew AD, and just domains way better than I did. And in those 5 minutes, I was, extremely uncomfortable, but convinced them that yes, indeed, that my company was the one to help them take them on that journey. And so you have to you'll find yourself, whether it's, in that or something less uncomfortable. And we did indeed help them solve the problem. It was great. You have to find those moments where you take advantage of, yes, I'm going to put myself in a room where I'm going to be uncomfortable. And there's a fear of, once you put yourself in that room, is, oh my God, if you don't do well, like if I didn't convince them in that 5 minutes that we could be the ones, was there a risk that, to, my reputation and my career? Of course there was. But if you never put yourself in the situations, you're not going to move forward. But if you don't want to move forward, that's fine. Like I keep saying, decide that's what you want or that's what you don't want. But you have to be really declarative, and then you can't complain once you say, hey, look, I'm not growing. Hey, you decided not to grow. Okay? You decided that was where you wanted to be, so you could go to your kid's baseball game, you could coach the team the next year, and you could make dinner for your family every night, because that's magical. Every night I sing my 2 daughters a lullaby. Even though one of them is 11, she still hasn't grown out of it. It's wonderful. I'm waiting for the day where she rolls her eyes and closes her door when I try to sing this. And I'm there every night. I'm there to make breakfast for them. I'm there to take them out for walks. I'm there to make them dinner. And that's a lifestyle I'm going to choose, and I'm going to keep choosing it. And if I get an offer from someone saying, you want to do this? And companies have come to me, you'll be in Milan and you'll be in Qatar and all this other stuff, and you'll do all this really cool stuff. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I've turned those offers down because that's not what I want to do. Yeah, I can make a bunch more money, but that doesn't matter. Why did I have a family if I don't ever see them? So ask yourself questions like that.
Hey, Yadin, it sounds like the secret message you're trying to tell everyone is that they should all be marketers of themselves. At least
you'd be
in
surprised.
some way.
When I have a serious situation, it's because a tweet is broken. And so I'll be like, wait, hold on a second, family. I have an emergency situation. A tweet is broken. Let me go fix the tweet. And I go and I fix the tweet. And I come back. When you're a brain surgeon, the stakes are a little bit higher. Or when you have root access to any particular system and you're doing a migration, you're doing an upgrade, you're doing anything like that, the stakes are a lot higher, especially if it's for a critical application or a critical platform. All of a sudden, you're affecting 100 people, you're affecting 10,000 people, you're affecting 100,000 people. My little kids do this website called OutSchool for remote learning. The OutSchool website went down. Hundreds of thousands of people were affected who had to go to class that day. Teachers didn't get paid. Children didn't learn. That's a high level of responsibility. I don't subscribe to that level of responsibility. If something wrong happens, it means, well, a CIO, maybe we might have to reschedule a podcast recording. But the output of that, once we do reschedule, is very high. So if you can find situations like that balance those two out. So yes, Nick, I do choose very intentionally not to be a brain surgeon or to be responsible for, an application that affects 100,000 people when it goes down. That is my choice. Other people like doing that stuff. That's not for me. But I do appreciate those people that do, and I talk to them, and I thank them for being out there doing that work.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that your encouragement to listeners is that by putting their work out there and being a little bit vulnerable, they are marketing themselves for that next career and to their greater network, whether it's professional connection or maybe even a social connection.
Yep. People hear the word comms a lot, and it's not a dirty word because communications is really just telling people what you're doing. If you want to just send an email out to other people in your organization, say, hey, look, I solved this problem. If anyone just in my org, whether it's on a wiki internally or whether it's on a blog to the whole world, to let people know what you've done and in hopes that that'll help them as well, is a really powerful thing because it has sort of a virtuous cycle effect where it helps them and it helps you, and then it helps them help you. And that continues a flywheel and continues to turn the ratchet. So the next time someone thinks of that particular thing, they'll think of you. The next time someone has a problem, maybe not be that one, they might think of you. And they might go to you, and then you'll have either a mentor or an information exchange, or they might go to their manager, and now all of a sudden some other department, some other team is now looking at you as a subject matter expert for something, and you're on a call. Being the person who would solve that problem is now teaching others. And that is a very powerful thing. It gives you a lot of, confidence. It gives you that skill of public speaking and presenting. It helps sharpen that saw, but it also helps others. And that's what I like to do every day. Is every day I wake up thinking about, who can I help today? And at the same time, put food on my family's table and help, my kids, get what they need. And I feel like if I can marry those two, which I feel like I have and continue to do, I feel like that's a win.
That actually dovetails with something that you said earlier on, which is, finding your passion. Maybe what your passion is doing exactly what it is that you're doing now, and you don't need to become a manager for career progression, right? But maybe what you do need is a organization that recognizes a technical career path. And if you're in an organization that doesn't have that, as an individual contributor to progress, then what you need to do is find an organization that does, that will recognize what you're talking about, right? To let you play a bigger role as an IC, to cross organizational boundaries, internal organizational boundaries, to maybe join a center of excellence, as a DBA or something along those lines. Is that something that you've seen before? This is one of my problems, that I have this insight that I'll just say I don't have a question.
So yeah, you don't really have to have a question. It's kind of like a conversational starter, like a sourdough starter. You kind of feed the sourdough. You put a cup of water and like a half a cup of flour in there. It's complicated. I don't want to feed sourdough. Okay. But conversational, feeders are really great. And that's what that is. You don't have to have a question. And I can personally vouch for that approach of, hey, look, if you don't have a certain role that you need in a particular company, yes, you do indeed need to find, something elsewhere. And as far as that individual contributors, well, because you can progress as an individual contributor if the organization lets you. And like you said, if that doesn't let you, well, then you have to find another organization. Don't just take a management role because you feel that's the only way to move forward. Unless, of course, there's a mortgage or kids or some other reason that really requires you to, but then be declarative knowing that you don't really want a management role. And you're going to do your best, and you're going to struggle through it, and it's only going to be for a certain period of time, and you're going to apologize to every single person who reports to you. And there's advice I can give you on that. But I have never been more satisfied and never done better work than I am doing right now, and not one person reports to me. I've had as many as 12 people reporting to me with 50 1099s in the field. That was the worst job I ever had. Let me tell you, I detested the work at the end. The beginning was actually kind of fun, but towards the end, it was the most toxic environment. Now that wasn't because I had 12 people reporting to me in 50 1099s. It was because of the organization, their leadership. So kind of different story. But I can personally vouch for the fact that I now don't even have vendors or contractors reporting to me, and I'm doing some of the best work and am enjoying the work more than I ever have. So you can be an IC, you can do the work, you can progress in your career, you can make more money, and you can do all of that without being a functional manager. Because let me tell you, on top of everything you're doing, managing people, it is a spiritual calling, I would say. It is a profound responsibility. And just being the functional manager part, mechanically, isn't that hard. But the problem is that the people who report to you need more than a mechanical functional manager. And they need somebody who shows up, someone who delivers for them, someone who's an advocate for them, someone who believes in them and helps them take the next step forward and gives them the confidence that they didn't even know they had in themselves. That is a very profound calling. And very few people are leaders, they're mechanical functional managers only because they've been put in that situation, because they felt that was their next step, or they were asked to and they accepted.
Yadin, thanks so much. That was extremely profound. Before we stop recording, can you tell us your social contacts, where people can find you and follow you?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, on the Twitters, at Porter de León. It's PorterDeleon. Of course, you can also find Tech Level Up, which is a level up project that produces the V Trail map. Find out all about it, but hashtag up, the hashtags V Trail map. I actually have a trademark on that. U.S. patent and trademark. Give me a trademark for V Trail map. Very, very special. It's got a little gold star on it and everything. So Level Up Project is a place. The V Trail map is going to be a virtual experience this year for those of you in and around VMworld of 2020. Usually we hand out something physical. It's going to be a virtual thing this year. So go to the hashtag V Trail map on Twitter. Find out all about it. All the ambassadors and the champions are going to be jumping up and down about it. But that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing, guys.
Sounds
Awesome.
like you need a technical career progression flow chart for that next time.
There is.
In
In
like
the
we can
V-Trail map,
collaborate
there
on that.
actually is a certification technical progression flow chart. You'll find
Sweet.
that, in the V-Trail map.
Awesome.
Hashtag shameless plug.
And subscribe to Tech Village, by the way.
Yeah, subscribe. Follow Tech Village on Twitter.
That's
and check
amazing.
out. And one other thing too, actually, one of the things I'm pipping out to everybody, I am the host of the newly launched VMware CIO Exchange podcast. It's one that I'm extremely proud of. You can find my latest episode with James Waters and Joe Beta of Kubernetes fame. We have a phenomenal conversation we do there, and that's probably the work that I'm most proud of now is those podcasts and trying to really raise the bar, even during shelter in place, trying to raise that bar for those thought leadership conversations. So check that out if you got CIO Exchange podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you decide to get your podcast from.
Great radio voice, that guy.
Yes, I have a face for radio, people tell me.
Awesome. Yadin Porter de León, thanks for joining us on the Nerd Journey podcast.
All right, Nick, John, it was awesome. Thank you.
Wow, Nick, that was just a great conversation. I really enjoyed listening to it again. And I see what you're saying about the concrete steps that Yadin was kind of giving us. I especially like the idea of proof of work, right? Just putting something out there so people can see exactly what it is that you do and the quality of work that you do.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his anecdote about the blog post he wrote for the VP that interviewed him, that got him the
Yes.
job. That was a
Yes.
very nice touch. And the idea that if only 3 people in the world know how good you are, then they control your destiny. I really like that, and I never thought about it quite in that way. But when you when you make your impact radius that small, it's spot on.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly true. And it just kind of harkens back to the idea of the artist. Like artists have a portfolio, right, that they put out there. And as technical professionals, we don't necessarily have that portfolio of work, right? If you implement a giant ERP solution, not everybody can see the architecture and the steps that you took to get it from ideation to going live and bug free. So, you know, as a replacement, we need to do some other stuff, right? The portfolio.
That's right. And maybe you never thought about yourself as an artist, but you are the artist. The canvas is what you make it. You have the brush, the paint, you're in control of what you create. That's going to be your proof of work. If you need ideas on how to get started in the blogosphere, go back to episode 61 and listen to what Amy Hervey had to say. Tips from a marketing professional there. And Yadin had some good ones too. A lot of the folks that have been on have talked about blogging as a way to get your stuff out there. One of the other things I really liked, and it was close to the very end, John, was about what good managers do, helping you find that confidence that you didn't know you had. And it just made me realize how many good managers I've had over the years. So it made me thankful.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely had the same reaction when I was listening to that as well. Well, anything else before we get out of here?
No, sir. Just a reminder that we'd like people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right, farewell listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @BJourneyman for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.